what is 4 multiplied by 9? The assistant's gonna give a response, 36, job well done. Hi everyone, Zubair here. A few months ago, I posted 2 videos on the AI Assistance API when it was first launched. Since then, those videos have received thousands of views and dozens of comments. Most of the feedback was around, can you please go slowly, explain things in depth. So in this video, I plan to go slower and explain everything step by step. Before we get started, I'd like to clarify that the Assistant API can be a bit complicated. So if you'd like us to help build your application for you, please do get in touch using the link in the description below. I run a team of Bubble devs and we build apps all day, every day for clients around the world. So let's get started. If you don't know what the Assistant API is, it allows you to build AI assistants within your own applications. Think of it like integrating ChatGPT inside your own web app. And it's really powerful, really fantastic. And we've created lots and lots of different use cases for our client projects. Okay. So I won't go into too much depth about what the Assistant API is. There's many videos on YouTube that cover it. I'm going to focus more on how to integrate it using Bubble. So to begin with, the first thing you need to do is install a particular plugin. It's called the API connector plugin. It's the one by Bubble itself. So I'm just going to untick third-party developers, this particular API connector plugin. So there's nothing to be worried about APIs in general. It just allows Bubble servers to talk to OpenAI servers. All right. So the next thing that you're going to need to do is go to platform.openai.com and sign up. So I'm already signed up. That's why I actually see my own project set up already. But you're going to have to go to platform, not ChatGPT. Okay, ChatGPT is the consumer-facing one. For the API, you're going to have to sign up to platform.openai.com. And to unlock GPT-4 and the latest models, you're also going to have to top up some credit. So you just need to go to organization settings and billing, and here you can add credit to your balance. You'll start with nothing, maybe $5 depending on how you signed up. But after you add some credit, the rest of the models are unlocked as well. So I'm already logged into platform. If you're not here, just click dashboard and you should reach platform.openai.com/playground. All right. So this is an interface by OpenAI where you can test API calls easily. Okay. Let's say I just want to, this is a chat endpoint. I'll go into the assistance one in a bit. But let's say I just want to run a simple test for is 3 + 5. Okay. In fact, this is the system prompt. So I'll just go into the user prompt, click run, and this actually runs the API call. And this is the response by the assistant itself. Okay. Now, this was the chat endpoint. In this particular video, we're going to be covering the assistant endpoint first. So the first thing we can do is we're going to create our assistant. Okay. So we don't need to create the assistant through the API. We can create through API, but we can create it through Playground as well. And it will be usable by our app in Bubble later on. Okay. So it's very simple. If you've created a GPT-S or anything, it's quite straightforward. You give it a particular name, math tutor in our example. You are a helpful math tutor specializing in primary school tuition. You always respond in a kind and encouraging manner. You use words that are simple and can easily be understood by primary school age children. That should be enough to begin with. So we can select the model here. We don't need the extra file search or code interpreter options. Temperature, so defaults are okay. I personally prefer to start with 0.7 temperature and top P, but that's just based on various things. Lots of work with the OpenAI Assistant API to begin with. It's not a hard and fast rule. It all depends on what you're doing. Now that our assistant is set up, at least in the beginning, we can just test it. What is 3 + 5? Okay. So I click run. And it takes a while, but then it's like 3 + 5 = 8. Great job asking questions. Keep practicing math. You're fantastic. Very encouraging. Now, if you take a look closely here in logs, okay, it actually gives you every API call that was run as well. Okay. So first step, it creates a thread. On the next step, it adds a message to the thread. And on the third step, it actually runs the thread. So if we take a look at Miro, what's the underlying process that's happening here? Okay. So I wrote something in the user prompt. So I wrote, what is 3 plus 5? And the step to do is it creates a new thread. So each user, let's say user A, user B, user C, each user wants to start talking to the tutor. It starts a new conversation. It's a new thread in the system. And then a particular new message, create a message in the thread. And the message, what is the message? The message is what is 3 plus 5? Okay. After the message has been made, we need to tell actually to run the message. Okay. And why is this distinction important? You can actually enter a few things. What is 3 plus 6? Click this plus message. So I haven't asked OpenAI to actually run this. Okay. Also, what is 7 plus 8? Again, I haven't asked OpenAI to actually run this. So I can compile a list of messages. It's a feature which is sometimes used, not often. A simple assistant won't use it. But just to realize the distinction, I haven't actually asked the tutor yet. I've just written the thing down. Once I press run, that's when it's actually going to run. And then the assistant's going to do thinking, and then it's going to answer. Okay. So you can layer on a series of questions together if you'd like. Okay. Think of it as if I haven't hit send. Okay. It's a separate set. But yeah, so after going back to our diagram, after creating a message, let me just zoom in a bit. So after creating a message, we need to start a run, okay, or create a run. And that's what's going to actually, so at this point, OpenAI is thinking, okay, the AI LLM is thinking, and then it responds with, I'm done thinking. Then it's like, now you can get the answer overall. Okay. So it doesn't just give us the answer. In the API language, it actually says, I'm done. And then we fetch. So if I show run completed, add message. Okay. So once it's done thinking, once OpenAI is done thinking, what does it do? It creates a message in the same thread. Okay. So we'll start with this simple example. What is 3 plus 5? What did it answer? This one. So it adds that same text message. That's a bit long, but okay. 3 plus 5 equals 8. Great job asking. It adds it in the same thread. Okay. It's not like it created something new or anything. We have the same message thread that's happening. So let's go from the beginning. Okay. So this is just the user inquiry. We'll just remove this one here. So the first thing, create a thread. The thing after it, create a message. What is 3.5? This is the user input. Okay. So user input. Then create a run. Okay. This actually starts the OpenAI. Then OpenAI is thinking. Then OpenAI is done thinking. I'll elaborate why we need these blocks. Once we start implementing in Bubble, it'll start getting very clearer. Then we're like, create a message in the same thread. So OpenAI creates a message in the same thread. Okay. In the previous instance, the user is creating the message. This is the user creates the message. Okay. User creates the message and OpenAI is done thinking. Then OpenAI creates the message and 3 plus 5 equals great. This is the answer. And then we can display this answer in Bubble. Okay. So a large number of API calls actually need to go through between Bubble and the OpenAI API. And these logs actually show all of it. It's quite handy to see these logs as to what's happening here. So let me just collapse them and it'll see. So create thread, add message, run thread. This is further add message, run thread. Let me just clear this a little bit. This one, yeah. So I've cleared the thread. Now it's like, what is 3 plus 5? So I'm going to just run it. So create a thread, add a message, run thread, run completed. Okay. So let me disable stream responses. Streaming is a more advanced feature. To begin with, for the initial tutorial, you should understand the basics, and then we'll get to streaming at the end. Okay. So I'll disable streaming, and then I'll clear the thread and go again. What is 3 plus 5? So now the logs will be like much simpler. Yeah. So create a thread, add message, run thread. Now see what it's going, get run steps, get run status. Okay. So when it's actually getting runs status is this particular message. OpenAI is thinking, OpenAI is done thinking. So what does Bubble need to do at these stages? Bubble needs to get the status of its thinking. And it's like, okay, status is, what if status is, I think, running or something like that. Status equals, it was here somewhere, status. So this is completed. Before this, the status would have been running or in progress, something like that. We can check the API reference for the exact status if we need to. So run and run steps. Yeah, this is a good flowchart example as well, that a run has a life cycle. It's queued, it goes in progress, it goes completed. There are other things. It can fail, it can be incomplete, cancelled, it can be requested to be cancelled, it can go elsewhere. But for this particular tutorial, we'll go with the simpler process. It starts with queued almost instantaneously. It goes into in progress, and then after a while, it goes into completed. So these three statuses are the ones that we need to be concerned about for this particular tutorial. Yeah. So now we need to do all of this in Bubble. Okay. So we're going to go step by step and walk through how we did it. Now we will use the API connector. Okay. So in our platform, we're going to generate an API key. So we're going to go here, API key. We're going to create a new secret key. And we're going to say Bubble, give it whatever name. I'm going to use it as a service account in Bubble. Project YouTube tutorial, create a secret key. Copy the key and let's place it here. So in Bubble, we're just going to add an API. So what is, just as a basics, an API is just a way to communicate to another server. Okay. So you need some authentication, which is like a key. Otherwise, like, how does Bubble know this is my account and I'm authorized to access this account billing history? So the key is like, the API key is literally, it's the key to my account, and I need to give Bubble the key to my account. Let me try and find API reference, authentication. So yeah, authentication this is the detailed doc as to what the authentication mechanism is, but practically speaking, it just wants, make sure in the header of the API request, pass authorization, bearer, token. And in the API connector, what this happens is private key in header. There's many other ways of keys, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Key name, authorization, private key, bearer, space, token. The token is what we copied. So this is the token, sk-bubble something. This is the entire token that we copied. And we have now, we can label this OpenAI. And we have now basically created an API collection in the API connector. We've copied the key over, we've added the authorization label. Now we need to make a specific API call. Now what's a specific API call? All these examples that we were talking about a while ago, about these threads. What is 3 plus 5? Create a thread. This is a specific API call. Add a message. This is a specific API call. Run a thread. This is a specific API call. Get run step. This is a specific API call. So one by one, we'll layer these on in the API connector. The simplest one, I personally recommend starting with the simplest API call. Usually it's something around get rate limit, get status, get user request. Here in OpenAI, the simplest one is generally get models. Okay, so I just want to know which models can I access. Okay, just to begin with, just to make sure we test our API setup is working or not, we're just going to copy this endpoint name. The endpoint name, it's just which door do I go to. Okay, so v1/threads, that's the door. v1/messages. Here, the door, the API endpoint is v1/models. This is the door that I'm going to go to. So I'll just put the type is get. I'll put the API name. I'll just give it a name, get models. And then I should be able to initialize this. And I see all the returned values. So in the raw data, in this particular project, I can access Whisper, text-to-speech, DALL-E, GPT-4o. All these models are accessible. So my authentication key is working. Okay, my first test API is working. So on the next step, what other APIs did I need? I needed the create a thread API. Okay, so we're gonna go to the API reference. We're gonna look at assistants. Not assistants. This is creating assistants via API. We did that when we were here. Thread, create a thread. Okay, so this API, the previous one was a type get because I'm getting information. In this case, I'm also sending some information. So it's a different endpoint, a different door, and I'm also giving information. So I'm going to use the post type. So when I create a thread, I'll just copy this endpoint over, OpenAI, add another API call, create thread, make it post, create thread. Now, for every door you go through, you have to pass some parameters. Some of the header parameters are shared parameters. The authentication key, this OpenAI assistant API is in beta, its assistance equal v2, and then some of the stuff you have to pass in the body. Okay. To create a thread, let's just add these headers as shared headers as well. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my API connector. I'm going to scroll all the way up to the whole API collection and add a shared header. I can add an individual header in particular API call, but I'm just going to add a shared header. Okay. So the content type, I'm just going to pass this content type and application/JSON. Application/JSON. Oops. Undo. That didn't work. This one disappeared. Where is it? Okay. So if somebody is a bit confused as to how I'm reading this particular type of curl command into the API connector, that's because I've done it many times. So we already have the authorization bearer token. We asked content type application JSON. The next one will be OpenAI beta and assistance equal v2. So we're just going to add OpenAI beta and assistance equal v2. Okay. So back to our create a thread. So when we are creating a thread, so we get a response. We don't really pass it optional. Yeah, we don't need to pass it much. Okay. Let's just initialize this API. And we now have a thread ID. Okay. So this is thread JWXYZ. If I go to my platform OpenAI, see this thread ID. This is one particular thread. So one particular conversation I've had with the assistant. Okay. Now we've just created. So we're only at this first step, post v1 create threads. The next step is add a particular message. Okay. And the particular message is of this type. Okay. Role, user, text, what is 3 + 5? So what's add message? Okay. So let's go to our API reference docs, messages, create message. So it has a different endpoint, which includes the thread ID in the URL itself, post, and we have some required parameters as well. It's not just optional parameters like in the previous API endpoint. So let's just copy this. Wait a second. Copy this message. API. Oh, we can click save here. So you can add another API call, create a message. The type is post. And we're gonna, so this particular, how do we pass thread ID in the URL? We pass it by, see this, use square brackets for parameters. So we're gonna pass square brackets for parameters. So now it's gonna show up here. What's the key value? Can untick private here. Okay, we untick private because we're gonna use it later on in the app. If it was private, like some key or token which won't change, we'll tick private here. So just to give, let's just initialize another thread. And here's the thread ID. So for our testing, we're going to use this thread ID. So if we try and initialize this right now, it won't work. It's going to say some error. You just did create a message missing a required parameter. All right. So because create a message expects the thread ID, we pass that. It also expects role and the content. Okay. So as a cheat code, okay, we can copy this. Okay. We can copy all of this here. So copy and paste it in the body. Okay. It doesn't look as nice, but let me just format it a little bit. So this is displayed in a little bit of a funny way. It's not actually correct. We need to remove this. You know what? I think this is not that easy. Let me just go from the API reference and go from here instead. So it is the same thing as curly braces role content, but when I was copying the JSON here, it looked the same, but the format is a bit broken. Let me just try and remove this, copy it here. Yeah, much easy. This is the right format. So our message, user message, content, what content am I about to pass? So if I change it to, so I can use, see this little here, use these types of brackets for dynamic values. I'm going to do this because later on, I'm going to need to use this in my app. Okay. So cut dynamic value question. Okay. So untick private again, because later on, I'm going to need to use it. What is 3 plus 5? Okay. So now if I initialize this, it will create a message successfully in that particular thread. So the thread ID is this, and the content, the run text, so this is the format that I was copying a while ago, which is not the right format. Yeah, so I've created a message. Back to our Miro board. I've created a thread. I've created a message. Now I need to actually create a run. I need to run it. Okay, so we are gonna go into run the thread, create a run or run the thread. Okay, we're gonna actually tell OpenAI, run it now. So going back to the API reference, run, create run. Okay. So now we just need to make an API call to this place and the thread ID, give the thread ID. We also pass the assistant ID. Now, what is the assistant ID? The ID of the assistant. Maybe we can make a math tutor, a science tutor, a chemistry tutor, or whatever. So the assistant ID is, we created it here, it's this one. Okay. So now if I just go to copy this, I can click save here, click add another call, post, create, run. It's this. Now, remember we were using square brackets when adding a parameter in the URL. We're going to copy our thread from here, untick private, and then we have the JSON here as well. What's the JSON format? Okay, the JSON format is quite simple. JSON format, and we just need to pass the assistant ID. So assistant ID. Okay. Now the assistant ID, we can bring it from the assistant playground. It's this one here. Pass it. This particular thing we can leave private. Okay. It depends on our app's use case. Okay. If we've got multiple assistants in our app, we untick it and we pass it from the database somewhere. But if we've got only one assistant, we can leave it private and there's no issues. This is not a security issue. I'll talk about security issues later. But this key, private key, is private, so we're fine. Nobody can access our account. If the assistant ID, even if this leaks, they can't actually make an API call to it without our OpenAI key. So nothing to worry about. So now I can initialize and create a run. Okay. So Now it's the OpenAI has gone, it's run assistant, you're a helpful math tutor. Side note, it's very easy to leak prompts, okay? And I'll show you in a bit how to not leak prompts. But yeah, in API calls, it's very easy to leak prompts and prompt parameters. But yeah, you can easily hide them, say. So this is, the run has started actually. So we've gone up until this here, run thread. So now we need to get a run's status, okay? And in fact, I'm just slightly, I see thread here. I wonder if I can change the URL and we see that thread here loaded. Yeah, we do. There's no logs because it didn't go through the playground. Let me just 1 second. Let's try, we keep doing 3 plus 5. Let's just do 3 plus 7. Okay. In fact, we're gonna need to, let's start from the very beginning. Create a thread. Okay. Brand new thread. Okay. HCF, brand new thread. Put it here. Brand new question. Okay. What is 3 plus 7? All right. And then brand new run. Okay. Same assistant. Brand new run. What is 3 plus 7? Okay. And then if we take a look here and we pass the thread ID in the URL. What is 3 plus 7? 3 plus 7 is 10. Great job. Keep practicing your addition and you'll get better. Very helpful. So the run has completed. We just haven't done it on the API. Okay. But the run was completed. How do we, what next steps do we want to do? What is 3 plus 5? Okay. So we've done create a thread. We've done add a message. We've done run a thread. We just need to run get run steps. Get run steps is a little bit advanced. You can go directly to run's status. Okay. What's the get run status? It's advanced in a case if you've got some files, some code running and some other kind of JSON running, then you need to go through run steps. In our simplest scenario, we can go straight to get run status. Okay. All right. Now that we have created a run and we've seen our run in the playground, the next thing to do is to get the run status from the API and get the run's message from the API. Okay. So let's just check playground. It's get run status. Very easy, straightforward. We're going to go to API reference. We're going to see, where is the retrieve run? Instead of get run, retrieve run, it's the same thing. Get run. Yeah, here it is. So we're going to copy this URL, go to our API connector, add another call, get run. So in this case, both the thread ID and the run ID are both in the URL. So we're just going to replace them with square brackets, click outside, and we see both. Untick private for both of them. So our thread ID is right here. Now our run ID, we have already initialized this API, so we don't really have our run ID. However, there is a trick. We actually do have it. So if you click this, manually enter API response, you can see the previous, the response of the API again. So we're just going to copy run ID from here, run underscore, control C, copy, click save, and click here, initialize the call, get a run. So get a run is going to give us all the, this status completed. Okay. Status completed. So now that the status is completed, we're going to check the latest message in the thread. Okay. So let's see. So we get run status. And after that, this is a get message. It's not here in the logs, but this is how we've implemented in our other client projects. So message list messages. Okay. So that's the API call you need to call. Just give me all the messages in the particular thread itself. So very straightforward API. So I'm just going to copy this endpoint, add another API call, get all messages in a thread, pass it here, square bracket for the thread ID. And after the square, untick private, copy the same thread ID over, and we can initialize the call, and here you go. So now this particular thread has the first message. So it's an array. The first message is our message. No, oh, it's in reverse order. Yeah. The first message is our message. And the latest message is 3 plus 7 is 10. Great job. Keep practicing your addition. That's the same as 3. Oh, we opened it. Let me try. Where's the thread ID? Thread ID. We're here. Open that one. 3 plus 7 is 10. Great job practicing. Let's try. So we created this particular thread from the API in Bubble. Let's try adding a message here. What is 5 plus 5? Okay. So we added a message, run the thread again, get run status happened. 5 plus 5 is 10. Fantastic. Keep it up. Okay. So let's go OpenAI. Good. So all we do is get all messages in thread again. Reinitialize the call is the same thread. And let's take a look. See, the latest message is 5 plus 5 is 10. This was what is 5 plus 5. This is the create a message we did in Playground. So Playground API quite linked. Okay, platform API. Playground and API from our Bubble side is quite linked. So just to reflect back once again on what we've done. Create a thread, create a message, create a run. There's the thinking mode, it's done thinking, and then we get all messages. Okay. Well, OpenAI creates the message in the same thread, and we get all messages in the thread again. Okay. And so, yeah, let me see. Now, this thinking status, we haven't actually seen an in progress status yet. So let's try and run it quickly and go for it. So let's start to create a thread. Okay. Let's copy this thread ID and this thread ID. We put the question, what is 3 plus 3? Initialize the call, and it's gonna be 3 plus 3. So we're gonna have to quickly create a run and get the run to see the in progress status. Okay. So I'm just gonna copy the thread ID. Is the run? Yeah, so the run needs the thread ID as well. Okay. So our thread ID changed KDE. That's the one we just created. KDE, create a message done. So we changed the thread ID here, and just in advance, I'm going to change the thread ID here in the next one. I'm going to have to quickly copy the output from this API call into run here and go get a run. So let's see. Reinitialize call. So the run has started. Run copied. Run pasted. Reinitialize call. What's the status? I hope it's not done. It's already done. Let's do quick. Okay. So 3 plus 3, get all messages in the thread. It'll be all done. 3 plus 3 equals, yes, just do quick. But yeah, trust me, it does go in progress, and then after it gives a response. If you have a large system prompt, we've got some client projects with large system prompts and large responses. It takes a while to answer. So it does take a while. So now we've done all the API connections. We've set up the assistant. We've seen the assistant logs. We've seen the API reference. We've set up all the API connections as well. Now let's talk about, before going into the front end, okay, let's talk a little bit about security. All right. So overall, generally speaking, the key for your door lock for your account, always have to keep it secure. So the private key is here. It's secure. Bubble will handle it. No issues at all. Okay. However, sometimes what happens is, because of these API definitions, you'll accidentally leak the prompt, probably the prompt. That's the more kind of like, for our AI startups that we've built for clients, that's sometimes, in fact, I've gotten on calls, just sales calls, and somebody's like, oh, I've built this already. And I'm 99% sure the prompt is leaking. And he shares a URL with me, and I've shared the prompt with him, and he's like, what did you just do? You hacked into my app. And I didn't hack it. You just haven't locked the door well enough yet. So I'll point out 2 places where you leak the prompt and how to obfuscate them as well. So first of all, let's just try and confirm the prompt leaking. So let's see. So the prompt is here. You are a helpful math tutor. Okay. Always responds. So if I click preview, okay, and the steps or any like front end inspect debugger will be able to follow them if they know where to look. You just have to know where to look in the right place. Yeah, press. So I'm no, well, F12 is the shortcut. Let me just right click and well, you can't see the right click. So we basically right click and click inspect. All right. So F12 is the shortcut on Windows and inspect. You just need to open developer console. Okay. After you've opened developer console and tools, you go to sources. This is for Google Chrome, Safari, and Firefox have other things, but you're just looking for sources, page, package, dynamic.js, dynamic.js. Okay. It's going to be a little bit tiny, the font, but please bear with me. You are a helpful math. But yeah, see this instruction sample value. You are a helpful math tutor specializing in primary school tuition. You always respond in a kind, encouraging manner. You use words. All of this. What just happened here? All the temperature, everything's here. Why is it all here? Okay. The temperature value is 0.7. Top P value 0.7. This is everything I've set up in Assistant here. How did it leak in the front end? Why is it all here? Let me see if I can zoom in so you guys can see better. See, all of this, you use words that are primary, everything's leaking. So what happened, okay, accidentally, very common, easy mistake to make. And this is one of the reasons I try and hire software engineers for our bubble agency for client projects. It's very easy to make mistakes. If you open manually enter API response, in the response, okay, it actually sends the prompt back and the temperature and the top. So in the response, it sends it all back. Okay. And because we haven't hidden it, and there is a way to hide it in Bubble, it's leaking in the front end as well. Okay. So I suspect one of the reasons why it's sending all of these back is because when you create a run, you can override the assistant's prompt as well. So this assistant prompt, if I go to create a run, one of the optional parameters, these optional parameters, I can override the instructions. So if I want to modify the behavior per message, I can override things. Okay. So we're not using it, but the API supports a lot of complex functionality. But yeah, so how do I prevent this from happening? So manually enter response, click save once. Okay. So what is this screen? In this screen, it's just trying to map, oh, this is a text, this is a text, this is a date, this is a text, this is a text, this is a date, this is some number, whatever. So it's text, number, it's mapped the date to a number because it's in seconds since ISO time, but that's fine. Text, text, text. So what we need to do is we go to instructions, and instead of mapping it to a text field, we click ignore field. Temperature, ignore field. Top P, ignore field. This completion tokens you can also ignore, but this is less security risk. Even the model, you could just click ignore field. So now if I click save, I've asked Bubble to ignore it, and because it's ignored, it doesn't like, it tries to, it basically hides it. It doesn't leak it in the front end. So there's two places where this happens, I think in create a run and in get a run, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, in get a run as well, you have instructions on all this leaking. So same challenge, if we go ignore field, temperature, ignore field, top P, ignore field, model, ignore field. So yeah, GPT-4o is a good search. I think we can go with the model. So F12 page dynamic.js GPT-4o. Yeah, GPT-4 hyphen o hyphen 4o. Yeah, so it's leaking in two places. Now if I refresh the page, because I've made changes in the API connector. Now if I press F12 of the debugger, sources, page, package, dynamic, GPT-4, I can't find it. Okay. tutor, can't find it. The prompt, the instructions parameter is not leaking. The temperature parameter, whatever I clicked ignore, it's not leaking in the front end. Okay, it's not leaking in the front end. Did we have any other keyword? Yeah, primary or school. School. No, the front end should not have school. School. Yeah, there's no mention of school. Okay, so now I've successfully secured my assistant's prompt. Okay, very easy mistake to make. So yeah, this is how you can leave the door open or close the door. Sometimes you just don't realize what happens. So just before we proceed further, a little pitch. So I run a bubble agency. We build apps for clients. We've built more than 100 plus projects for clients. And if you'd like us to build a project for you, just get in touch using the contact details below. And we've got a team of software engineers, experts who've built many projects. Myself, I'm also a software engineer by background. I've hands-on work on a lot of the projects as well. So yeah, looking forward to getting in touch. Thanks. Now, so the next step that we wanted to cover after securing our API calls, we need to lay down the front end or the back end into our particular app. One thing, let's just focus on the front end and see, let's go to design. We need to follow basically all of these steps: create thread, user, create one, create message, all of it. So we'll definitely need thread in our database. I personally like putting messages in our database as well, but that's okay. All right. So, but let's say in fact, you know what, we'll go with best practice. I wanted to simplify the tutorial, but this is an in-depth tutorial and also going into best practices. So I'm just gonna try and add both thread and message. Okay. So be sure to set up privacy rules as well after. If you don't know what privacy rules are, please be concerned. Google them. There's videos by Bubble and many other people about what privacy rules are, but be sure to set up privacy rules. All right. So our thread has just a thread ID. It's a text. And yeah, that should be fine. And a message can have a related thread, which is the thread. And a message can have the message text. And that's, you type text. And there are two roles, the role a user or an assistant. So we can just call this a text as well. Ideally, we can make an option set for role, but because of the API response, it comes as a text. It'll be just easier to use this as a text overall. So thread text, I think that's enough for now. If we need more, we'll just add more. So create thread, user, create run, message, get thinking done. Okay. Let's try and do all of this in the front end as well. So the first thing we do, let's make a particular button. Okay. Create a thread. All right. So this will create a particular thread. All right. Add a workflow. And now notice I don't find my API calls here. And why don't I find them? Because by default, all of them are configured as data API calls. This one use as data. If I want to use it in a repeating group, I use data. If I want to use it in the workflow tab, I probably need to use it as an action, as a separate action. Okay. So nothing else to do apart from that. Create a thread. So this will just create a particular thread. For debugging reasons, I personally like to use a plugin called the Air Alert plugin. This one, Air Alert by AirDev, and 300,000 apps. So popular. It's a lovely plugin. Very simple, standard. It's just afterwards, let's just add an alert with thread created, and we can replace the thread ID here. Okay, that's just us. So now we need to save the thread somewhere in a state. So, or let's just create a thing. We have the thread in the database. So create a thing, thread ID, result of step 1, ID, done. So we now have created a thread and saved the thread ID in the bubble database. Okay. So let's just test this out for a little bit. There's nothing fancy happening in the thread at all, but just create a thread, thread ID created. No message in the thread at all. Nothing, yeah. So now before we go create a message, okay, we need to select a particular, well, let's just create a message as well. Let's see. So for creating a message, the bottom chat input, okay. So question input, type your question here. So, and then we have a button like send question, right? So whatever is in multi-line input question, send question, what are we going to do? We're just going to create a message. All right. So create a new thing, message text, multi-line input question value. Okay. Now, how do I connect the thread to the thread that was just created? Okay. And for that reason, we're going to need a drop down. Let's just use a drop down. In your particular app, there will be a mechanism to select the right chat thread. So if you're making some type of chat UI, which thread are you? So like if you open ChatGPT, you have all the threads on the left. This is the same thing. So you're just going to add a drop down, threads. It's going to be dynamic choices. We're going to do it's going to be of a type thread. And we're just going to search for all the threads in the database. Okay. Again, privacy rules, you should set them up. Don't ignore them. Current option, thread ID. And in fact, thread ID can get a bit tricky. So we'll also add current option created date so that we have a date reference here as well. I may need to increase the size of this one. Okay. So let's just take a look here. So see this, we've got a thread in the database. If we create another one in the database, create another one. Oh, so I'm sorry, in the recording, you're not seeing the drop down value, but I actually see the values. Okay. Yeah. So if I select them, you'll start seeing them in the recording. That's fine. So now back to our create a message flow. So just to reiterate, we were here, then now we're trying to do this, create a message. Okay. So send question, create message. Now related thread, we can use the drop down, which we got now, drop down threads value. Okay. And we can, the role is user because we created it. Okay. Arbitrary text, user. So we've created this particular message, not the system, not the assistant. And a good alert to sprinkle message created, and that will be like this one message text, and another one to reset relevant inputs will be needed. We have we created the message in the database. We actually didn't create the message in OpenAI. So now let's actually make the API call to create a message. Once again, let's just go do it all in once. So we forgot to, so create thread is action, create message is action, create run is action, get run is action, get all messages in thread is action. Okay, all of this is action. So create a message. Now, again, the message also needs the thread ID. So we're just going to go drop down threads value and thread ID. You'll probably need to, so it depends. It won't be a drop down in your app. You'll probably need to use a state here. That's just me guessing. So the question itself, create a message, is whatever we just created, message text, or you could reference the multi-line input as well. And message created, OpenAI message ID is result of step 2 ID, and then reset relevant inputs. Yeah, that should be good. Let's just basic test it out. Let's pick one of the threads. What is 8 plus 8? So I just created the message. That's the content of the message, and that's the message ID. Okay. So if we try and oh, it reset. It reset the drop down as well. Reset relevant inputs actually, because we referenced the drop down here. It reset the drop down thread selection as well. We don't really need to reset the drop down. So let's just place all of these in a group. I think that should do it. In fact, we may need to do a reset a group rather than reset relevant inputs. Okay, back to this place. Let's do another test. That's why I like the alerts. So thread, what is 9 plus 9? Yes, our thread still selected, and yeah, message ID. Okay, so now let's just try and we can open the thread and see here. Okay, if we place the thread ID here, it's the SPQZ. Let's just go it in the database to copy paste easily. Threads, SPQZ. So we just put 9 plus 9. If we go in the assistant and place thread ID here, we should see what is 9 plus 9. What is 8 plus 8? What is 9 plus 9? Note, a run has not happened. Okay, so we haven't run it. We just sent 2 messages. We have not run. We haven't reached create a run yet. Okay. So now one thing, if I just before we go into what's it called, creating a run in Bubble, this particular thing will need to run in a particular loop, because it has to kind of like, until it's done, it has to like make a decision. Where's that decision? Status in status equal completed. So if the status is completed, then go to done and go ahead. If the status is not completed, it's basically back here. Okay, so not completed. Let me just zoom in a bit. Okay, so if OpenAI's status is not completed, let's just run it again. Or essentially error handling should also be done, but this is a basic tutorial. But yeah, not completed. If it's completed, then it go ahead here. Okay. So what I like to do in patterns like this is to create an option set and run the loop using that. So I'm going to go back into OpenAI editor, Bubble editor option set. Skip this tutorial. Okay. So run status. Okay. So this is my own kind of logic and status, which part of the flowchart and what I need to do where. Okay. It'll make sense in a bit. So bear with me, run status. So I just have, where should I plug it in? Run started, run in progress, or run completed. I think for now, this will be fine. Eventually, in our production apps for our clients, we have a series of statuses that we run by for the whole message. But for this tutorial, because we've only got the simple scenario, we should be fine here. If we need to, we'll just add one. Okay. So now this was just adding a message. We need another button here, which is basically, let's just go here. Oh, send and run. Okay. This is just mimicking a little bit in the assistant playground. They have this plus for just sending and this run for the actual run. Okay. So in fact, let me just label this only add question. Okay. This is the outline button. And this is where is that? Oh, this button is accidentally outside the group. Where did it go? Oh, it went all the way at the bottom there. I wonder why. It's glitching. It reminded me of the old bubble responsive engine. It was so hard. Okay, we're very glad that the new bubble responsive engine exists now. Okay, so only add questions, add and run. Okay, add and run. Okay, so what workflow did we add here? Create a message, reset, group reset. So we just need to mimic this: add message and run, add question and run. Okay, relatively straightforward. So now create a message, create a new thing, message. We'll mimic the initial steps, which were message text is multi-line input value. The thread is the drop-down thread value. The role is arbitrary text user. The next OpenAI one is the thread value and thread ID. And the question is the message text itself. Now, the next step, what do we do in our create run and like create a run basically? Let's start with create a run. Okay, we give it the thread ID, drop down thread value. We are only using one. We're only using one assistant for now, so I'll just leave this here. If you were to use like multiple assistants in the database, you probably need to add assistant ID somewhere as well. And depending on how it's like science teacher, math teacher, chemistry, whatever. For now, this is fine. Now the run itself, the run ID itself, I don't really, do I need to use? Probably not. So I don't need to save it in the database. I'll just save it in a state. Okay. I'm going to do the design tab. Personally, I like placing states on the page, so and all of them, so that they're just linked in the right place. So current run. Okay. And it's just a type text. Okay. And the default value is blank. That's fine. So, and I also need another state, which is my option set, which is the run status. Okay. So that was the run status option set. Let me just, for best practice, I actually prefer labeling these OS. And I just realized not running is a status. Okay. So not running, started, move up. Yeah, not running, started, completed. Okay. Started. What is started? There's no such thing as started. It is in progress. Okay. So I was just looking up as if there's some cheating. That's just me thinking. Not run in progress. Okay. So yeah, we need to add a state of run status. The default value is not empty. It's not running. Okay. So when I start, I create a message in the database. I create a message in OpenAI. I create a run. Now I want to set the state of an element, and I want to set the current run to be the run ID. Okay, that's the run ID. Result of step 3. Yeah, result of step 3 ID. That's the run ID. And I want to set the run status as in progress. Okay. When I send it to OpenAI, I'm assuming, yep, it will be in progress. Okay. Now, this particular loop of is it in progress, now I need to do what's technically called polling. I just keep checking OpenAI. Are you done? There is a better way. It's called streaming. Streaming has its own quirks. I'll get to it in the end of the video. But for now, for understanding, let's go with polling to begin with. Polling is workload unit heavy because every a second or two, you're just checking OpenAI servers. Okay. Now back to here. So run status in progress. So I can add a particular type of event. It's called a do every or do when condition is true. In fact, do every, do every, not the condition is true. Let me think. Yeah, it's do every 5 seconds. Okay. We can shrink it to every 1 second. Okay. But only do this when the page's run status is in progress. So don't just keep running all the time. Only do this when the run status is in progress. Okay. And what do I need to do here? Okay. I need to get a run and check its status. So I've got my drop down thread value here, thread ID, thread values, thread ID, and I've got my run ID with me, with the current run in the state in the page. And now that I've get a run, let's just do an alert, here alert, and a run status, result of step 1 status. Okay. This is just to display it. Okay. Get a run status. So when the run is done, I just need to change the status and this loop will stop. Okay. So I do a set state index run status completed only when result of step 1 status is completed. Yeah, I have to click out and this string will work. Yeah, completed. I think completed is the right word. Let me just check in the plugin 1 second. Get a run, manually enter response. Yeah, completed is the right word. Sometimes it's done in different APIs. Okay. All right. So OpenAI get run, error standard, success, and yeah. So let's just check what's happened. Let's just check, see if we're on the right track. We've got our playground where we can see all the messages anyway. So there's a nice cheat code possible. Let's open a particular run, 5AFZL. In fact, let's open the same run we've got. Open SPQZE. So we've got this open already, SPQZE. So let me just, what is 10 plus 10? Add question and run. So run status in progress, run status completed. Took a second. The thread's not showing here. Let me just refresh the page. What is 8 plus 8? What is 9 for that? What is 10%? Great question. Let's figure it out. 16, 18, 20. Well done. So the status is completed and the messages are there. We just have not gotten the messages in bubble yet. Okay. And for that, what are we going to do? So we're going to trigger on this run status is completed. Okay. So we're going to click do when condition is true. Okay. Every time. All right. And only when this page run status is completed. Okay. And here we're gonna get messages, get all messages in a thread. Okay. Same drop down or whatever state in your actual app. Get all the messages. The latest message when a run is done will be by OpenAI. So we can create the message in the database, create message. This will be result of step 1. First ID. No, let me just have a closer look at get all messages and the API connector one more time. Get all messages. So it's giving the get first ID and last ID, which is interesting. Let me reinitialize the call so that I see the whole JSON. Yes, I see the whole JSON now. In that manual enter response, so subtle difference. Manual enter response is showing me only one item in the array, even though it was a chain of messages, because for the JSON structure and for this initialization, only one is needed. But if I reinitialize the call, I'll see the whole list, which makes it easier to read sometimes. So that's the message ID BHQK, message ID, first ID and last ID. Okay, we can do first item or use the ID. That's fine. So workflow, create a new message. The thread is drop down thread value. So yeah, it is data, first item, content. That's where is the, oops. But I did first item. Let me just look closely at it again. Data, content. Oh, so it can respond as a message as well. Content and text value. Okay. So data, content, yeah, that too is an array type text value. Yeah, this is more in the case of if, you know how it's DALL-E and it generates an image, so you get type text and you get type image, or if it's code interpreter or other complex use cases, it's all nested. And you can in the chat completions object pass multiples as well. For now, let's simplify this. We'll just go content, first item, text value. So that's the text that we're interested in. Result of step 1, data, first item, content, first item, text value, drop down threads value. The role here is assistant because the assistant is responding. Okay. And that should be done. Error alert standard. Run completed. Message saved in DB. Okay. Let's just run this now. We forgot to reset relevant inputs in this one. Let's add it 1 second. Add and question. Reset a group input. Okay. So let's pick the same run. Okay, the same one. You know what? Let's pick a new run. 5AFZL. Let's just make a new one. Create a thread. So this EUSK. Okay. EUSK. So what is 2 plus 2? We keep asking very simple questions from our tutor. So add question and run. Message created. Run status went straight to completed and run message saved in DB. So let's take a look at the database in our messages. So we've got the user, we've got the thread ID. Let me just click this little magnifying glass and I can change the thread ID. Instead of showing the database unique ID, I can look the thread ID here. So I've got my thread underscore EUSK, yeah. So I've got the user one and the assistant's response, okay. I can continue. Thank you. What is 8 plus 8 plus 8? Add question and run. Run status in progress. Run status completed. Message saved in DB. Okay. Yeah, thank you. What is 8 plus 8? You're welcome. Let's figure this out. 8 plus 8 is 16. Now let's add another 8 to the 8. 8 to 16. 16 plus 8 is 24. So it's doing a great job. Well, it's a tutor. It's telling me how it's done. Okay. So yeah, we haven't displayed this thread in the front end yet, but that will be a standard repeating group. We can just scroll this down. A repeating group. Chat. Messages. Do a search. Message. What thread? Related thread equal drop down thread value. And inside, we need to place a particular text. And it's like current cell message role as to who said it. Yep. Current cell message text. Okay. So I'll just add a little colon here. Okay. So let's see what this thread now looks like. USK. What is 2 plus 2? 2 plus 2 is 4. Great job asking. Do you want to try another maths problem? Thank you. What is 8 plus 8? Assistant, you're welcome. Let's figure this out together. 8 plus 8 is 16. Okay. So what is the square root of 16? Okay. I had a question. Run state is completed. Message saved in the database. Now you notice the database has saved the message, but I don't see it reflect in the front end. Okay. So we can like refresh the page, but that's not really a fun thing that somebody will do if they refresh the page. So, oh, where did it go? Let me just see. Oh, we're only looking at the fixed number of rows. 1 second. Yeah. We don't need to look at just 4 rows, and you can look at all of them. Yeah. Square root of 16 is 4. Okay. 4 times 4. What is the square root of 64? Oops, 64. 4. Add question and run. It's like, what is the square root of 64? Run status completed, message saved in DB. So now I've noticed sometimes it's fine. It's not scrolling to the last entry, but sometimes it kind of like, it doesn't refresh the data. Okay, so if I say here, what is 2 plus 2? See this moved a little bit. So it immediately showed it, and it moved, the scroll bar's moving a little bit, it immediately showed more. So what we just need to do here is scroll to the last entry. Okay, but it takes a little lag to do it. I'm just gonna make a custom event. Okay, scroll, and I'm gonna be scroll to entry of repeating group message, list of messages, last item. Okay, animate the scrolling a little bit. But I'm just gonna call this add and run a question. So I'll just gonna, what is it called? Schedule a custom event. Yeah, schedule a custom event, like, I don't know, 0.3 seconds. And so it's just gonna scroll it after a little while. And I'm gonna call this again in my when the run status is also completed, so that it just scrolls a little bit after a while as well. So let's take a look at our thread. Okay, now what is 1 plus 1? Add a question, scrolls down, run completed, scrolls down. Very fast, fairly good. If you noticed any glitches happening, personally, when it's production ready client projects, glitches do happen, and it's very subtle and very annoying. You can rely on the repeating group, and it's fairly good in updating. I won't lie about that. It's really good. But what we also sometimes do is we just add a display list in repeating group, which forces the fetch as well. In fact, I'll put it in the scroll itself. So display list in repeating group, and the same data source. So search for messages. I can right click, copy the expression, and I can right click, paste the expression here, same messages. So it just forces the fetch from the front end to like, oh, I need to fetch everything. So let me just see. Oh, okay. What is 9 plus 7? Add a question, scroll ahead, run completed, scroll ahead. What is pi? Ooh, that'll be an interesting one. Scroll ahead, run completed, pi, ratio circumference of a circle to diameter. Okay. So what have we done? Just going back to our flowchart, we created a thread, created a message, created a run. We created a little loop on the create run done. OpenAI creates the message, then we get all the message in the thread again, and we create a message in BubbleDB, and then we display the messages in a repeating group. Okay, so fairly straightforward. Well, I say this after doing it a lot of times, but hopefully this was quite useful. And we don't, you could not save in the messages in the database. I personally like saving them so that I can kind of like, I've got easy kind of like debuggability here as well. And the rest of my front end is easy and based on the database. It is workload unit heavy in a sense. You could directly just get all messages in the thread and directly show it here. But I personally prefer keeping the threads, everything here as well. All right. So the next thing that we're going to now talk about is streaming. Okay. Even though this is really fast, okay, let's say our tutor was, or we ask a particular question, which is very long. It's like a very verbose poet type assistant or something. Write a 500 character poem about pi. Let's say a mathematician, poet. So we add a question and run, and I'm gonna wait, and well, this was fast. Okay, write 1,000-character poem about pi. The thing is, the assistant GPT-4o is super fast, so this problem is not as much of an obvious problem. 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 4 second, 5 second, 6 second, 7 seconds, 8 seconds, 9 seconds. Too long. Too long. It could, did it time out? Part of me. Oh, no, it didn't time out. Okay. So that was far too long. I thought it was just broken. So, and this highlights the crux of the challenge. When there's no response, it's too, people think the app's broken. I built it and I thought it was broken. Whereas if we do the same thing in Playground or in ChatGPT, let's enable streaming, iLogs, and do write a 5,000 character poem about pi. And then it just starts. Okay. So if a user starts seeing this, they're like, oh, it's working. And especially with ChatGPT and assistants and general chat bots these days, it starts streaming everything. So that's a more common UX, whereas the previous one which we built was like, it's fine for small 1 second, 2 second things. But the moment you have a very long response time, it'd be like, is the app broken? And the user just walks away that the app's broken. So now to implement streaming in the app, it's a different mechanism. Okay. So 394 events, it's the same run thread. It's because every character or a few characters are returned in chunks. It calls it chunks. Where is it? Let me just try and find object delta. Okay. Each chunk. So this delta is space poem. The next delta is space about. So it must have a poem about. So each stream that we saw, it's like a lot of streams, and each delta, we just like it just responds with this subtle there's. Okay. So it'll be somewhere here. Yeah. There's a number. Now the Bubble API connector natively, it can't handle this type of streaming response. Okay. Now there are certain plugins, and if you search for plugins in the App Store, you'll find them. However, I will add a cautionary note here about if I do streaming, or what do I say? No, not that. Yeah. ChatGPT with streaming, OpenAI real-time streaming, SynthFlow streaming. There's definitely many OpenAI assistants with streaming. But one thing to be very careful of, okay, some of these plugins, let me just try and, how do I describe it? Remember back when we were talking about the security and privacy rules and like how we can easily leak the prompt? Some of the plugins out there will leak the API key as well, and that's not really good. Okay. And why is this so? Okay. The reason is you have to understand underneath as a technical architecture. There's the front end and there is the back end in Bubble servers. Okay. So the front end is the user's browser. This is what you see. User's browser. Things are executed in the user's browser. Okay. In the back end, things are executed on Bubble servers. Okay. Now, this space is not secure. Okay. As you saw a while ago, you could just like inspect and see a lot of sources at the top and see what's going on here. So you don't want to place any secrets, and the secret, especially the OpenAI secret API key, we don't want to place any secrets in the front end, okay? But if you don't place the secret in the front end, how can the front end stream the entire response, okay? So the plugins, some of the plugins for streaming support, they will leak the key in the front end, and they do state a little warning note. This plugin will leak your key, and that is a perfectly fine use case if you have an internal app. It's just for your company use, and you're fine. It's just company employees. They're using the assistant. The key leaks. No issues, no challenges, no issues. It's fine. But some plugins will leak the key in the front end, and for some use cases, that's okay. But in many cases, any consumer-facing cases, you want to go through Bubble's backend servers before showing it, or some of the plugins, they have a third-party intermediate server. So this one has the actual secret key and provides temporary secret keys to users per thread or session. So some of the plugins, they have a third-party intermediate server. So the plugin server gets the actual secret key, the OpenAI secret key. And the plugin server will then, every time you create a thread, you'll ask the third-party server, give me a temporary key for this thread, and the third-party server like, yep, fine. And if the temporary key leaks in the front-end browser, that's okay, because the key will last only till the thread, and the key will only work with the third-party server for that thread. So that's relatively safe. There's no leakage as such. You can't use that temporary key to make direct calls to OpenAI servers, okay? You can only use that key to make calls to the third-party server, and that's only for that thread itself. That key leaking is okay. Now, instead, there is one very, very workaroundy way. A part of me was hesitating even publishing this mechanism overall, because it feels hacky, and it also has a high workload unit cost. And it's just, anyways, once I explain it, you'll be like, what's going on here? And definitely it involves custom code as well, so it's not purely a no-code solution. But let's try and dive into it and see how we go, okay? So step one, let me just remove this, yeah. Step one, we're going to install what's called the Toolbox plugin, okay? This allows us to run some custom JavaScript easily, okay? So we've installed the Toolbox plugin. Now, then we have to enable backend APIs. Unfortunately, backend APIs are not allowed. Well, this is test this feature for free, then upgrade to starter. Oh, it used to be not allowed in the free plan. Privacy rules. Definitely set up privacy rules. So you enable the workflow API, enable the data API, enable messages. This must have changed. A while ago, this was not allowed on the free plan. Yeah. Okay, so after enabling these, now we've got the backend workflows enabled. Now we're going to create a workflow. Let's call it stream. This is purely a server-side workflow. Oops. Stream. Okay. It's not a public one. We pass the... What do we pass? I'm going to have to look at my notes here because this is a tricky one, okay? The thread ID or the run, because the run will have to start here. So we have to pass the thread ID, or we'll just pass the past thread. We'll pass the whole thread object itself. Okay, pass the thread. Now, excuse me. In here, we're gonna run what is called server script. This particular script, it runs, it's what the Toolbox plugin allowed us, this new action got installed. Now here, I can just run some custom JavaScript, okay? So I'm gonna keep looking to the left to another browser and copy paste because this is a tricky one. So before we actually write the script, let's just try and plan a little bit in Miro what we're trying to do here. Okay. So we've got the user's front end. We ask bubble backend. Now the bubble backend actually starts a run, okay, in streaming mode, And once the run has been added in streaming mode, it kind of like uses the bubble data API to write messages as they come from OpenAI. So they write messages as they come from OpenAI, not when they're all done. Okay. So, and the front end is separately displaying the message. Okay. Now let's try, and once it's working, then I think it'll be easier to come back and refer to this flowchart. All right. So it took a while to figure this out, and I'm gonna try and walk through and rebuild what was implemented. It is a bit of custom code, and it will take a little bit of while to figure out, but just try and bear with me. Keep in mind just another caveat. It is it has some constraints. It's workload unit heavy. It has some constraints. And if I'm honest, it's not complete either. The whole thing is not complete either. This is just a kind of like a glimpse of, yeah, streaming purely within Bubble is possible. Okay. So first of all, just a setup. Okay. We need a particular data type. I've already created stream chunk. So I'm going to create a new one that's for the implemented one, which I'll explain in a little bit, but I'll just recreate it. I may refer to this in a while during the work as well. So I need a data type to capture a stream. Let's call it stream one because we've already used stream. So stream one, I need a particular text field in it called chunk text. I've got my stream one, I've got my chunk. I need to go into settings. I need to go into data API. I need to make sure data API is enabled for the new stream one that I just made. I need to generate an API token. Okay, let's just call it bubble 2. So I need this API token as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to need a piece of code. What does this code need to do? Start a run, okay, for the right thread ID, for the right assistant ID, and update the bubble database with individual chunks as you receive them. Okay, that's what the code needs to do. Front end, go to bubble backend, start a run streaming mode, and update the bubble data API and display it in the front end browser. So let me just remove this. Now here's one I prepared earlier. Okay, I'm just gonna copy the entire script, paste it. All the other options I believe are simple. Async log errors text. I don't think I use the output value. Scrim async log errors and return type text. Output type text. I don't think I use them in the script itself. I just want to match because this was really hard to work and it's still half working. But let me just try and explain. So bubble API token, this is my settings, the API token I just made. Okay, I'll pass bubble API token. Then the bubble API URL. Okay, so the bubble API URL is this one in the base. Okay, /obj. Where is it? So this is the base, and then / after it is what I just created, stream one. So if you're confused about what is created, you can open Swagger. Swagger is the definition for the JSON definition of the data API. So it's that URL, version test, API 1.1, meta swagger.json.json. I'll refresh it, and then stream1 should exist here as an object. Port pass, yeah, this one, /obj/stream1. Okay. So where's my backend workflow? Yeah, stream1. I've got my bubble, got my OpenAI key. I've got my OpenAI URL. So the URL is threads, thread ID runs. I've got the headers, content type application JSON, assistant v2, the bearer token. The token is this const API key. Then I've got my bubble headers to make an API call to the bubble data API endpoint. It's okay. This is super complex stuff. So if you're lost, it's normal. Don't worry about it. The bubble header, if we make an API call to this bubble endpoint stream1, we need to pass application JSON, another bearer token, that's the bubble token. Just the JSON object, stream true, and the assistant ID. This is equivalent to what we are doing here, except it also has stream equal true passed. We didn't pass it, so stream was off in the API connector. So stream true assistant. Now there's a try loop. So I'm going to try and make an API call to OpenAI. After I've done that API call, I'm going to try and read the result, and I'm going to try and read every chunk as it comes. As each chunk comes, I'm going to try and make an API call to Bubble and push the chunk into Bubble altogether. Okay. Now running this is, the only thing I added, create a new stream. I just added a starting and an ending here. So I'll just add some logging here. Create a new stream 1, chunk, starting. This is just me for my own kind of logging. Starting, ending, and the server script. And then in the front end, I made a copy of the index page that we were working on, index stream. And just in the only add question, let's just like add question and run in backend. Okay, let's call it that. So we've got the same create message, OpenAI, run message, reset group, air alert. Now we just schedule API workflow, the new one that we just, stream, that's the one, yeah. So in fact, I thought let me just see. Okay, so that's the copy. This is stream, yeah. And let's just call it stream1. That was the previous one. Stream1 drop-down thread, current date time. Yeah. So in the front end, I'm going to add the question and send the run to the back end. And in the back end, it's going to come here, start. It's going to run the server script. Then it's going to end. And it's going to add all the chunks in the stream itself, in the stream chunks as well. Let's try and run it to see if it works. Apologies if I sped through this a bit. It's basically complicated and it's very advanced bubble stuff. So write 1 to, in fact, write a poem, write a 500-character poem about pi. Add question and run backend. In the backend, we can check it. That's a lot of chunks coming through. It's a lot of chunks coming through. So that's starting. Then it's like, that's the leaking. You are a helpful math tutor. Then it's, oops, for a moment. Let me try and content I'd sure. One second. I'd and sure. And each, because we're literally, so let me try and elaborate these are literally the deltas here. And it may have missed some of the deltas as well. This code is very, very raw and it's not really that elegantly built. So let's see, space special, just one word at a time. So it's just coming in bubble, one word at a time. Let's see if we can make any rough sense even. Come on. Even if a sentence. us helps it 14.3 grand. So O comma is pi is it may have missed chunks. U pi for about. In fact, where's the thread ID? We can try and look at the thread ID in what did we select? We selected the UXNED. Okay, so UXNED. Let's take a look in the playground. UXNED. Sure, I'd love to write a poem about pi. Pi is a number also grand. It goes on, never ends. Let me try and find those chunks in stream 1. Also, at the end, I've got the whole thing, but for individual chunks, is magic year after year, exclamation mark. Pi is magic, comma, year after year, exclamation mark. So these are the chunks that were year after year, pi is magic. But just to try and like compare as to what just happened here, once again, so we went from the bubble front end, okay? We went from here. We clicked this button. We went into here, create a message, OpenAI, create a message. We scheduled stream 1, okay? What the scheduled stream 1 goes into backend workflows, okay? Into this one, it passes the thread ID. Ignore this is just logging. This server script is where everything happens. For that thread ID, it runs in code. Whatever, basically what we did here in API connector, create a run, it runs that same thing in code, okay? It runs the same thing in code, and it also tries to push all the data as the data comes back into Bubble backend servers, okay? And as the data comes back, it's gonna, what's it called? Yeah. So what is the next thing that needs to be done? The next thing that needs to be done is to actually parse all these chunks, value year after year, exclamation mark, comma, magic is, parse all these chunks, try and display it in the front end. That's the part I haven't done and completed yet. Even this, I was like, it just feels so wrong, the whole thing. Not wrong. I think it's possible to make a nice custom plugin out of it. I personally, we try and use Bubble natively as best as we can. We can code a bit if needed, hack around, and we have occasionally built custom plugins for client projects as well. But we tend to prefer vanilla Bubble as much as we can. So I don't know if there's much else I can talk about streaming in general. There's third-party plugins where you stream through somebody else's, everything goes through somebody else's server. Okay. There's the insecure plugins, which could be fine for your internal employee kind of staff. And there's this Bubble backend approach, which I've only kind of like shown the path that it's possible. If somebody in the community picks it up and turns into a nice, lovely plugin, makes it easy. There are constraints here. It's workload unit heavy. This only runs for like 30 seconds, so you can't have a very long output, but 30 seconds is a long time. 30 seconds is a long time. And this code needs to be like, it needs to parse the chunk. It doesn't need to give everything. It just needs to give the words, the extra words. But yeah, that's more JavaScript that I feel like doing for today.